Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the SafeHouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the SafeHouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. Today, we're going to dive into the complex world of cloud security. And in order to do that, we are very fortunate to have Jeff Moncrief join us today because of his years of experience in this arena. He can break things down in a very simple, easy to understand, and pragmatic way. And Jeff is the Field Chief Technical Officer of Sonrai Systems. Jeff, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm delighted to be here. Very, very excited to talk to the audience.
Well, you know that Sonrai is one of the content contributors and early content contributors of the SafeHouse Initiative. And Jeff, having you here to help guide us through, because you can really break things down, and like I said, in a very pragmatic way. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience and your background?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, my experience and background, that's kind of what leads to the pragmatic approach that I'm kind of known for as it relates to, securing things in the public cloud. But Jeff, I've been doing InfoSec professionally now for almost 25 years. And it dates back really to what many call the original internet security company, which was Internet Security Systems, which back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, they were, if you were doing intrusion detection and vulnerability scanning and those kinds of things, you pretty much had one of their products. So I got started in InfoSec there in support and technical account management and engineering. And I've been in InfoSec ever since. I did stints at Tripwire, also at Landcope, which was acquired by Cisco. And for a number of years, I ran security teams, pre-sales and post-sales at Cisco. And about 4 years ago, I made the crazy decision to jump into the world of startups. So for the last 4 years, exactly, yeah. Like you said, I've been at Sonrai Security ever since then, and living and breathing this world of cloud native risk. And I got to tell you, Jeff, it has really opened my eyes up to a world of risk that I just was not privy to prior to coming over here, where, all my attention prior was really focused on network security. Network traffic security, vulnerability assessment, intrusion detection, APTs, insider threats, everything involving, the network. And then I'm quickly humbled when I come over to Sonrai and I'm focused on public cloud security full time. And I realized that there's this whole new vast world of risk that's completely new that we all have to be thinking about and worried about as it relates to securing public cloud workloads.
What was the biggest eye-opening realization you had when you did the crossover?
Yeah, so what before coming over here, I was actually focused before coming over here when I was at Cisco. I was focused on kind of an emerging trend for the whole world, kind of, which was securing public cloud workloads. However, I was focused on securing the network side of public cloud applications and workloads, meaning instead of doing NetFlow analytics on routers, switches, and firewalls like I'd been doing for years and years and years, and looking for security risk using, network-based telemetry, I did the same thing in the public cloud using VPC flow logs, using like in Azure, NSG flow logs. So it's essentially the same thing. You're analyzing network flows for suspicious activity and anomalies, but you're just using network telemetry from the public cloud providers. So, I thought I kind of had a grasp around how to secure things that you would put up in the public cloud. I think the problem, Jeff, is that I had a very brick and mortar mindset of, hey, folks were doing lift and shift. And instead of having servers and virtual machines in the on premise and in data centers and colos, they're just doing the same thing up in the public cloud. And they're just going to move them up there. And we got to protect the network and protect the perimeter. And I thought I had it figured out. I come over here, Jeff, and what I did not realize, and this is something that I know that you've heard, and I know that your listeners have heard, hopefully they've heard, and that is that identity is the new perimeter.
Yeah.
And I had heard that, but I really didn't get it, I think. And I come over here and I'm like, wait a minute. Our customers that we're talking to, they have living, breathing cloud native workloads
Yep.
that have databases and virtual machines or serverless functions that are using different microservices and things like that out in Amazon's cloud, AWS or Azure or GCP, and there's no network footprint. And I was baffled. There's no wait. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? There's no network footprint? And I was familiar with IAM. I mean, the product that I repped at Cisco that I supported, it required an IAM role to function, to go do permissions. But I had never looked at the identity fabric in the public cloud as a network. That's what it is. And my
Interesting.
eyes were open to the fact that these cloud native applications are living and breathing and functioning, and they're doing all kinds of things with all different kinds of dependencies and services, and there's no network footprint. They're all communicating through the access fabric, which is essentially a network. And so, I understood what identity is the new perimeter means, but I quickly started to understand that identity is not only the new perimeter, identity is the new network. And that, when you realize that, and you start to think of the access fabric in the public cloud, the way that we secured networks for decades, it really starts to be eye-opening and make sense about what you kind of have to do to start to build a security strategy to protect it.
Holy cow, that's a huge realization, a huge mind shift, I would think, right? When you talk to people, they go, "Oh, it makes sense now. You explained it to me."
It is. It's a huge mind shift. And I think that one thing that I've learned over the years is that as much as it's completely different, it's actually very similar to what we've been doing for years and years and years on-prem. So it's completely different, meaning that the plumbing is different. The permits and denies are not in the next-gen firewalls and that kinds of things. They're actually in the JSON on policies that make up the access fabric throughout these different cloud providers. And then I think another great, kind of analogy that I tell folks is that, if I were to build a data center, Jeff, and I built a huge data center with just hundreds or thousands of servers in it, right? Would I have one big broadcast domain and no firewalls and that lack of segmentation, that lack of zoning, the fact that it's end-to-end flat, is that acceptable?
No.
No
I don't
way.
think so. There's no way.
World. There's no world in which that's acceptable.
Yeah.
We must, and on a network, we have to put firewalls in to zone, to segment, to do microsegmentation, and all those kinds of things. Well, fast forward to today and what I'm seeing in the public cloud, Jeff, it's like people have built data centers in the cloud, virtual data centers that are flat. Everything can talk to everything.
So I've heard the term like kill chain. So there's no kill chain kind of a thing. It's just like it's open territory and just go open hunting. Does that make any sense at all?
So here's the kill chain itself it's a framework with which an attacker can take advantage of your environment, whether that's through weaknesses, through 0 days, and it has different phases like reconnaissance, exploitation, persistence, lateral movement, all the way to achieving your objective, which would be data theft. Kill chain is a well-known and respected model that Lockheed Martin developed many, many years ago that has now been adapted to the cybersecurity world. And it's totally relevant in the public cloud. But the problem is that if you've done nothing to protect and defend against it, once an attacker gets inside the platform, they're just going to be able to have their way. They can go wherever they want. They can assume whatever they want. And most importantly, they can grab whatever they want. And if you were thinking of it prior to that through the lens of a kill chain type thing, or maybe MITRE's attack framework, you would have put measures in place to stop the attack at those different stages of the manifestation of it. So, whether that's segmentation or, least privilege or removing unused things or taking a look at lateral movement scenarios, all of those different things that I just mentioned, that's what we have to do today. We have to do it in a world that's cloud native, though, where the network footprint doesn't exist. But it's completely relevant from a threat perspective. What I find, though, when I plug into environments is that there's an identity crisis.
Okay.
True. It's an identity crisis. And it's because folks have deployed all of these workloads and they've built these clouds and they've built these different applications to work, to function. And the developers weren't thinking about security.
So they architected it a certain way and it really left it open and exposed. Is that what you're saying?
1,000%. Yeah. It's security was an afterthought. There's this mindset, I think, that the public cloud is secure, right? If I have my vulnerability scanning at the perimeter, if I have agents on my virtual machines and that kind of thing, then I'm secure. If you think about a hub and a spoke,
Yeah.
all right. It's a very spoke-minded security strategy that a lot of these organizations have taken because they just really were not aware of what was going on at the hub, and the hub being the platform itself. And so what happens is these developers just build all these applications with far too many permissions on the workloads, on those different person and non-person identities, on the roles.
Yeah.
And they get the app out and it's functioning, and you've got the mobile app on your phone and it's amazing. But what you don't realize is that, there's a world of risk behind that up in the cloud that they weren't thinking about. And we come in, and this isn't a product pitch or anything like that, but any tool that does kind of what Sonrai does, we come in and we illuminate the entire identity fabric, give you visibility that you never had before. And it's just so eye-opening as far as skeletons in the closet that are out there that are just this world of risk that's ready to be taken advantage of. And I think the biggest eye opener for me was understanding how that cloud footprint works from the access fabric perspective, and then connecting the dots with what we're seeing day in and day out from a data breach perspective, where we're seeing every single week the same thing over and over again, and that is credentials exposed in GitHub, credentials leaked on the dark web, access keys and tokens that are exposed in buckets and storage containers and those kinds of things. And what that means is that world out there from a credential exposure perspective is ripe for the picking. If you get a credential, if I get a credential, I can log into the center of your cloud right now using my laptop without having to exploit a vulnerability on a workload and compromise it or anything like that. With the public cloud, it's super, super scary because there's not one or two or four ingress egress points. There's thousands of ingress egress points. And all it takes is one of those credentials from one of those GitHub exposures, and I'm right smack dab in the center of your cloud. That's what has mattered.
So with your customers, when you approach them, you say, okay, here's the journey we're going to take together. What does that look like? I mean, where do you start and how do you kind of ease into it, and how's it roll out?
Great question. So I kind of look at this in two phases. Number one is realizing that there's a problem. Okay. There's a problem. That's first, right? And it's a true problem because it's been proven that as of now, the number one attack vector that folks use from a malicious standpoint is social engineering or compromised credentials. They just get right in. And I use the term, they just log in. So you must accept the fact that attackers today in a public cloud environment, they just log in. It's so much easier than having to craft bespoke exploits to vulnerabilities and get controls of workloads and then work your way if you can just log right in. And that's the truth. Okay. So that's step one, is recognizing that it's securing this kind of footprint is no longer a nice to have. It's a need to have. And I would argue it should be the dead center of your public cloud strategy. So that's step one, is acknowledgement. Step two is, okay, once we acknowledge that we have a problem, we need the ability to turn the lights on, light it up, provide visibility. And that's where a tool like the Sonrai comes in, or any other. They call them cloud infrastructure and title management tools now. CIEMs is kind of the next evolution of cloud security posture management, or CSPM tools. And you need a tool like that that's designed to come in, map out all of the identities, show you which ones are used and unused, show you which ones are overly privileged. We call those excessive entitlements. And show you, more importantly, attack paths, lateral movement, attack paths, trust risk, cross-account escalation risk, things that you would never have visibility into before, unless you had, purpose-built tooling to understand how an attacker could give you and the organization a really bad day because of all these connections that had been made months and years ago that have been living out there that you just didn't have visibility into. So you need that tooling. And then third, I'd say, is once you have the visibility, you need a strategy. That's the one thing I've learned here. I've been here now 4 years. The one thing I've learned that I have to help folks with more often than not is, what do I do first? Like,
Yeah,
this is a
exactly.
lot of risk that we've been ignoring for years. And sometimes you find a lot of stuff and it's like, where do I even start to fix all of this? And I always tell folks it's really simple. It's very simple. You focus on two different parts of your cloud, the non-running part and the running part. Okay. The non-running part of your cloud is what you take care of first. You take care of all that cyber litter and garbage, I call it, that's been sitting out there for years and years and years, ripe for the picking. And these are unused identities, person identities, non-person identities, access keys, things that have rights and privileges to go wreak havoc in your cloud that are not in use and are not needed. So you get rid of those first. The other thing that you do is you figure out, okay, I didn't realize that I had 300 identities that have admin level permissions. Why do I have 300 admin level accounts that can be used against me if a credential is compromised? I probably only need 2. So what do? We get rid of the other 298, and even the 2 that are needed, we govern them and we put tripwires around them to make sure that if they are used maliciously or if something happens, we get an alert. So that's the first thing that we do. The second thing that we do is we focus on the running cloud, if you will, because that's what's left over is the running cloud. And you focus on the excessive privileges that are on those identities, and you get rid of the unneeded, unnecessary entitlements on them. And it's amazing what happens when you do those few simple things as far as the attack surface across the access fabric being removed. And what you're left with at that point is a more advanced yet very, very dangerous thing to clean up, which is lateral movement scenarios, attack paths, and things like that can be used maliciously against you if a workload does get compromised or if an identity does get compromised. The way, it's essentially illuminating a way that an adversary could indeed exploit the kill chain at that point and maneuver through your cloud, privilege escalate, take advantage of separation of duties scenarios and those kinds of things to really give the organization a bad day. The next thing that you have to focus on is administrative level accounts, Jeff. And, why do we need, in a certain scenario, why do you need 300 admin level accounts? You don't.
Right.
300 possible accounts that could be used maliciously against you doesn't make any sense. Those are the keys to the kingdom, and they should be under lock and key, and you should only have several of them. However, time and time again, we see that, developers have just deployed things with full admin access. They want full admin access. The cloud ops team, all of those users want full admin access just because it's easier to do their jobs. However, after a number of years, 300 admin level accounts is not acceptable. Oh, did you realize another 700 accounts have permission to give themselves admin level rights? I mean, so it's essentially 1,000 level admin. It's like, it's an identity crisis, right? So that's the second thing you have to do is get control of those break glass level accounts, get it down to a select few, and the ones that you do have, put them under lock and key, enable governance and monitoring on them, set a tripwire, be alerted if someone uses it. Why? Because the whole purpose of a break glass account is to only be used in case of an emergency, right? We shouldn't be using those for everyday tasks.
Shouldn't there be like a check-in, check-out, somebody who manages that?
Oh yeah, there totally
and there's not, I take it.
There's not. No, it's 300 admin level accounts is quite the norm in a lot of these environments. I've just never had these visibility. It's not because folks don't care. It's because it's fighting for priorities. They've never had visibility. Sometimes they just don't have funding to get purpose-built tooling. And, but luckily the market's starting to move. But that's the second thing that you have to do is take care of those admin level identities. So at that point in time, Jeff, what you've done is you've taken care of the non-running cloud. That's what I like to call it. Everything that's not being used, except for those admin accounts that you've certified, is gone. Now you're left with your running cloud or the identities that are needed. However, step 3, they're almost always over permissioned. They have too many permissions to do too many things when they really only needed permission to do one or two things that the app required them to do, whether it's a machine role, a key, a token, a function, whatever that might be. And so that third step is you've got to get to least privilege, especially in production type environments where, the buzzword that we've heard for many years, zero trust. Well, in the world of identity risk, zero trust, I say, same acronym, ZT, it's zero tolerance. We won't tolerate unneeded permissions. And so you really got to focus on that. And it's really cool from a holistic perspective to watch what happens to the attack surface in the public cloud when you get rid of everything that's unused, you get rid of everything that has God level access, and then you get rid of all those unnecessary permissions. What you're left with then is a very, very interesting view into the true running cloud.
Got it.
As it relates to lateral movement paths, privilege escalation, crossing account boundaries that you never knew about, third parties that you gave access to that you never really had visibility into, that still have access into your cloud and you didn't know it. And that's really where you can double down on breaking the kill chain and getting rid of all of those kind of lateral movement scenarios where when and if someone does get in, you want to make it a dead end. And you can focus on that strategy. And it's not just a one and done strategy, Jeff. That's the way you fix it initially. That's also how you build a strategy moving forward to continue to govern it. Because guess what? Tomorrow's a new day. Everything's ephemeral. New bonds are going to get made. New, paths are going to get made. And you need to continuously kind of govern this world of identity risk. And that's kind of, what we see a lot here in our day to day.
Yeah, so the lateral movement is that the harder one to track and to contain?
It's the harder one to have visibility into. And it's because it's truly looking at the access fabric like a network. You might have a, trace route. Okay, we're going old school. You might have to pull up a command line and, you're going to do a trace route and watch all the different hops and routers and switches and firewalls that packet traverses to get to the target. It's kind of the same way where if you have the appropriate tool, it will come in and illuminate those connections, those bonds, and those relationships across the identity fabric and show it to you in a visual way that's just like a network. And it shows you how you can maneuver from one identity to another. You jump from one account to another, and I can exploit a full kill chain and attack path in a matter of 60 seconds from the command line, actually showing that, what a tool like what we're talking about here will illuminate for you. And that's really, it's not hard to fix. It's hard to see. And then when you see it, it also gives you an ability to view your cloud from the inside out. And what I mean by that is, in this world of identity risks, it doesn't matter which vendor you talk to or the cloud native tools, they always talk about what can an identity access? What can a workload access? Well, what if you truly have pervasive end-to-end visibility, I can flip the script and I can say, how about focusing on what matters the most to the business, which is the data? It's the crown jewels. Now I can tell you, did you realize for this data container that you care about, that has the customer information, that has the patient data, did you realize that 67 identities can access it today? 60 of those are non-person identities. They're not even people. And guess what? 6 different accounts are providing that access in. That's a level of visibility that you have never had before. And when you can do that, you start to slice and dice from the inside out and focusing on the crown jewels, what can and can't access it. And when you do that, those attack paths start to diminish as well from the inside out. So it's a cool approach. If you ask me, that's the way I would start, is focusing on what matters the most to the business and playing whack-a-mole with a bunch of things that you don't even know whether or not they matter.
So really what you're suggesting is that it's a technical subject you deal in, but you're saying step back and think from a business perspective, start with the data, start with who needs to access that data and what they're doing with it. So think like a business person first and then do the technical solve. Is that what you're suggesting?
I am. I'm saying instead of playing whack-a-mole with a bunch of random and focusing on workloads, and again, it's a hub and spoke mindset. Instead of focusing on the spokes, Focus on the hub, because that's where, that's where the most damage can be done to the business at any point in time. That's where your data is. That's where the sensitive databases are, the data containers, the folders, the structures, those kinds of things. Start with protecting the dead center and work your way out. I call it reverse engineering the maze. Why
Yeah.
focus on the outside of the maze if you can already figure out every way that someone can get in and
Yeah.
and secure it from the inside out?
Boy, Jeff, this has really been, enlightening for me in particular, because this is a subject I don't know a lot about. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners and our users of the SafeHouse Initiative aren't either. Any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I'd say, as a final thought, again, you have to understand the truth, right? The truth is, today, attackers and adversaries, they're just logging in.
Mm-hmm.
So when they log in, you have to accept it's going to happen. When they log in, how can you minimize the blast radius? And they're going to get a credential. There's going to be another exposure. Something's going to happen there. You must be thinking about not only securing it, minimizing the blast radius, but you must be thinking about how are you going to govern it moving forward? Or how are you have to be setting tripwires, those kinds of things. So that's the first thing I want to leave them with. And the second thing is, don't forget the strategy. It sounds so simple. Take care of that cyber garbage and litter. Take care of those God level accounts that are throughout all those different cloud environments.
Yeah.
Then you can focus on the more granular things like least privilege and removing lateral attack paths. And I think that's the big thing I've learned over the years, Jeff, is there's a method to this madness where you can take big chunks out of this risk up front just by removing the things that aren't needed.
Jeff Moncrief, you've been fantastic as our guest. Thank you so much for your insights and your knowledge and sharing that with us.
Absolutely a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you having me. If anyone has any questions, or if I can ever help answer anything that might come up in this area, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to help, always.
All right. Well, thanks, Jeff. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the SafeHouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information on the SafeHouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen. Send us an email at safehouseinitiative.org@gmail.com, or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.